So let's start a little brief overview of how the current script, which is the player controller provided down below, works. And first off, we're just going to make a quick run through to what the current system can do. We can move around with WASD keys. We can look with the mouse up and down, and it clamps so we don't go beyond that point. We can jump, and we can hold the jump to jump a little bit or jump more. You can see that it can jump even higher by holding the space, or just do little hops by tapping it gently. And the exact same issue, if I get pressed against this and jump, you can see that the exact same issue is happening here with the player controller because I'm getting clipped. And there's even some weird bugs where you can like jump and levitate, and then you can jump again and just kind of get on top of this weird looking slope, even though I shouldn't be able to. I was able to pull that off. And that's because of the nature of how the grounded physics logic works. So there are some minor bugs that I'm personally fine with. This is very typical in some games to have these, even official titles. But we also have an animation system. You can see down below in the animator window, if I left click, I'm doing a fast attack. And if I left click multiple times, I can transition through multiple fast attacks, going fast attack 1, 2, and 3. I also have a strong attack. And I can transition to 2 slow attacks or strong attacks by tapping it twice by going through that system. So as a script overview, very briefly, we have just the one script, player controller class, within which there are 3 private classes. There's the gravity controls that contains variables that relate to gravity. There's the movement controls that contains variables that relate to, of course, movement, and there's some dodge variables here. Not all of these are actually supported in the script. Dodge is referencing a different script that was eventually cut out, and this whole thing's being rebuilt anyways, as I mentioned in the Discord discussion. We can technically just remove these, and I'll update the script in Hastebin so that it's cleaner. The commit controls give me a fast attack and a strong attack boolean to track, and then we have the plugins that we're going to be putting in to the player. So we're expecting a character controller, a camera transform, a weapon animator for animations of the weapon, and the player input script that gives us the actions from the input system. We have the movement controls, gravity controls, and combat controls that have been specified up above. We're just instantiating an instance of these private classes that we can keep internally. And it's just some additional values for pitching the camera and jumping, etc. Here we have the start script. The start method is being called by the Unity mono behavior. This is, after all, a mono behavior class. So Unity will be calling the start function. All we're doing here is we're hiding and locking the cursor in the center, which we can remove with an escape key. The onMove function is being called from the onMove action. The onLook function is also being called when the mouse moves. So when we hit WASD, this gets called. When we move the mouse, this gets called. If we left click, on fast attack gets called, and if we right click, on strong attack gets called. If we hit spacebar, on jump gets called. And in this particular scenario, we have check that says if we're started, the jump if we've just pressed the button or the key and we are grounded, then we can jump, and we're going to set our velocity, our vertical velocity, to the jump force value that we have. And if we lift the key, or if we've held it up until the performed point, then we're simply going to stop our jump. We're going to turn jumping to false, and that will be the end of that. The onDodge function, I've removed the variable, so we can just simply remove this. It's not going to be supported. And then the update function, this is called once again by Unity. The mono behavior update is going to make a check if we're grounded. If we are, all this is doing is giving us a minor negative pull just to keep us stuck to the ground. And then we are calculating our movement. So we take the movement from the movement vector x and y. We multiply this by a transform indicator. What this is doing, the transform.right, is just essentially a new vector tree. Or, yeah, it's a vector tree, I believe. And it's saying that, actually, no, I think it's a vector 2. No, it is a vector tree because it's going in the vector tree. So it's basically 1, 0, 0 for the vector right, And for the vector forward, it would be instead of 1 there, it would be a 1 here in the z-axis. So when we're going right, it's the x-axis. When we're going forward, it's the z-axis, the depth axis. And if we want to go up, if we're jumping with the gravity, you'll see that it will be the y-axis, which will be up, the vector dot up, and that's how it works. So in this case, we're getting that those settings put in. So if we have a 1 on left or on up, we're making the surface movement updated, and then we're also multiplying it with the base speed plus the modified speed. So we have a base speed of 5 and a modified speed of 0. As I mentioned, this was actually used for dodging. It's not really implemented in this case. So we're basically multiplying our surface movement vector by 5. So let's say we have a vector tree of, let's say, 0.5, 0, 0.5. We're moving diagonally in the right forward direction. Then we're going to be multiplying this by 5, so it becomes a vector tree. I think I have my caps lock on. Yeah, I do. And it becomes 2.5, 0, 2.5. Right? That's essentially what that's doing, this line, just to multiply us with the base speed. We're checking to make sure that the magnitude of our movement is not exceeding the maximum speed we specified, and we're also making a debug log. If we're clamping the speed, we're going to log in the debug just to say, hey, we're clamping speed just in case I'm expecting myself to speed up more. I get to see this clamp debug just to inform me that we're getting clamped. So that's a nice little log you can put in just to remember that something's been done. And then we're doing a controller.move on our player controller. That gets us the actual surface movement times the time.deltaTime, because we are in the update function, not in the fixed update. We have to make sure we correct for the time, because update gets called each frame, and if we're drawing 500 frames a second, this will get called 500 times each second. So we want to have 1 of a 500th move being done per second. That's why we multiply with time.deltaTime. If it's getting called only 1 frame per second, this will be a value of 1, and we'll get the full surface movement. If we're getting 10 frames a second, this will be a tenth. So we'll only do a tenth of the movement for 10 times in 1 second. And this gives us the full movement that we want each second. There's a combat check that does absolutely nothing, because we're only playing animations and not really doing collisions and such. Not yet, anyways. And in the gravity section, we're basically saying, get the gravity modifier. And this is something to do with whether we're still jumping or not. This is a function that's further down below. And the gravity modifier, we're checking if, well, we're basically getting the standard gravity modification that we have up top from the variables available. We're checking if we're jumping. If we are jumping, we're going to add the time we've spent jumping up to a maximum jump time, the jump max time. If we're not yet at the jump max time, we're going to divide the gravity that's pulling us downward by 3, which allows us to float a little more by holding the spacebar. And if not, if we've exceeded the time that we can spend jumping, then instead we'll set jumping to false, so we no longer make this check. So we save ourselves some computational cycles, and we will not be dividing the gravity modifier. We'll keep it what it is, and the jump elapsed time will get reset back to 0. So next time we jump, we can start adding it again. Then we'll return a gravity modifier, which will be a negative value, because gravity is, after all, a negative value. It's negative 8.1. So we return this result up to the gravity modifier point. So our velocity, which may have been 15 or whatever the velocity was when we jumped, is now being reduced by the gravity modifier script. And this will eventually be taken from the positive values to the negative values, and it will kind of parabole us back down gently into the ground. We'll make the move happen as we calculate the velocity each time. So it will start at, let's say, 15. So we're starting to really accelerate upwards. But then the gravity modifier will each time reduce it. It will take away, it will slice away at it bit by bit, and it will reduce it from 15 to 5 to 2 to 0, where we just basically peak at the top, and then it will start descending us by giving us a negative modifier, and we'll go up and we'll come back down until we hit the ground. This is, of course, also being corrected for time.deltaTime, and you should always be doing these kind of moves by multiplying with time.deltaTime to correct for how many frames we're drawing in the update function. If we're doing in the fixed update, you don't have to do that. We're also making the updates to the camera, so we're calling this function at the bottom. and it's taking the look vector, which is what we're giving from the input actions using the mouse. The pitch delta is how much pitch we want to change. We reduce this from the pitch value that we've stored up above in the class. We're clamping the pitch value to be -90 to 90, so we don't go way above our heads or way below and end up rotating all over the place. And we're making a quaternion rotation, the Euler degree rotation, so it can be a standard degree like the 90, etc., not in radians, but in Euler degrees. And we give it the pitch value that we want to acquire with no additional rotation in the y or z axis. So we only want to rotate around the right vector. So we can look up or down, kind of like on a swing, right? If you're holding to a swing or a pull-up bar, you can swing forward and backward, you can point yourself upwards or downwards, but you can't end up like rotating like an airplane would by doing a twirl or anything like that. So we're simply rotating around the x-axis here. We make that camera transform location, and then we're also going to transform the player's game object transformation. So the player itself is being rotated on the up vector, which is the y-axis, so it's the upwards pointing axis, which is right here, the green arrow. It's basically being rotated sideways, like so, right? And when I was talking about the pitch, it was being rotated like so. That's the x-axis. So if we look at the W, the red arrow, as you can see here, barely visible probably, but the red arrow is the x-axis. So when we're rotating around the x-axis, we can do an up and down, and when we're rotating around the y-axis, we can do a left or right. So when we're doing the rotation on the x-axis, we're only rotating the camera. So we're essentially doing this, right? You can see the weapon is rotating along everything, and we're leaving the body as is. So we can end up seeing, well, in this case it's not working, but we would technically end up seeing ourselves if we're far enough and we're not clipping into it. But when we're doing the rotation for the player, we're doing the entire rotation. So we're rotating the entire player's transform, and this rotates the camera contained within and everything else. So it also obviously rotates the sword along with it. And this is how the rotation is done. So once we've moved this way, if we want to move forward, the next thing we do then is we end up moving forward like so, right? So that's how it gets done. That's why we're rotating the entire player instead of just the camera. Because if we're only ever rotating just the camera, and we rotate it like this, then we want to move the player forward, we end up still moving it in a different direction. The camera's pointing this way, but the player is moving this way, which we don't want. That's why we rotate the entire player all at once. I'm not sure if I broke something here, but let's pretend I didn't and move on to the code. That pretty much covers the look. The gravity modifier, we've already acquired it. The reset speed is something that was called for the dodge action. So when we modify the speed, it gets called again, but we don't need that. The adjust speed is also being called by the dodge action. We're adjusting the speed, so we're going to remove that too. It's really unnecessary, and it's just going to confuse you more than help you. So that's essentially it. All we do then is check for combat if we're left clicking, and essentially fast attack is set to be on. We're setting an animation to trigger the fast attack property or the strong attack property. And we're going to wire these up next just to see how this gets done. Very simply, I already have this set up, but I can just delete everything. Delete that. And in the weapon model, I have no controller. I technically wouldn't even have an animator, so I'm going to remove the component as well. So I'm going to go in my weapon, and I am simply going to tell you what, I'm going to reset everything. Everything should be reset. And we will leave that for what it is. It's fine. It's not a big deal. So I'm going to move this to be in front, and maybe a bit to the left and maybe a bit further up so we can see the hilt. I'm clicking on the main camera just to get a little viewpoint here, just to see where I'm at. I'm going to move this a little bit further up. And we're going to start this in that position, just to have a point of reference to start with. I don't really need to do that. Now, when we're doing animations, it's best not to do animate the actual object, but animate something below it. And I've made the model like so, But I think I can also make a weapon pivot object here. So weapon pivot. Let's create an empty weapon. Drag that in, and instead we'll animate the weapon itself. So the model is still going to be the model, which is just an empty game object that contains two cylinders crisscrossing each other. And we're going to be animating the weapon, so we still have an empty game object that we can use to transform. The weapon you can see is set at 0, 0, 0, and the animations should be done this way because otherwise you're going to have quite a bit of a headache. We go into Window, Animation, and Animation, or Control 6. It will bring up this screen down below. I already have it open, so it doesn't really do much. We create an animation by clicking that. You could make a folder here. I already have them. You can make an animations folder. I made a weapon folder, and I'm going to make an idle animation. Very briefly, I'm going to hit the record to immediately start saving all the things I want to be doing. I'm going to give this a basic, simple rotation that I'd like to have it have. I guess I shouldn't be doing that because then it will reset. So, okay, we're going back to that. And I'm moving it just a bit just to give me the 2 key points. I'm going to go a sample rate of 60, it says, and I'm going to go to 60 frames and just poke those frames in. And currently, it's starting and ending the exact same position with no changes, somewhere in the middle. I'm going to go in there with still the recording button kept on. I'm going to drop it down a bit. You can see a new key point, a new keyframe is coming in. I'm going to rotate it ever so slightly. And if we play it now, you can see it does this kind of animation. And in the game, you can see it's doing that. So that's, I mean, not great, but it's fine for me. As far as I'm concerned, it don't really matter too much. We can maybe lift it ever so slightly up. Maybe too much. Let's drop it a bit. And maybe reduce the rotation. I think I increased it instead. That's fine. I will basically move the entire weapon outwards, and this is why I said you should just animate something internally, because this way, even though I moved it outwards, it's still animating properly. And if I didn't, if for example, let me just give you an example here of what I mean when I'm saying put a game object to wrap around it. Not sure why I even put play there. But we're animating the weapon. Let's say I move it out here instead of the weapon pivot. And then I go into the animator and I choose to animate my idle. You will see that it will basically snap back to position, right? It just snapped back, which is not what we want at all. We tried to move it out here, but it ended up snapping back right there. And that's the reason why, is because that is being animated. This entire object is being animated. So if you've moved this and you've introduced a value like a z of 0.833, when you're animating it, that position is being reset. You can see that it's setting the z value to 0.004, and it will keep setting that value for as long as the animation occurs, which makes setting the weapon in a different place a bad idea. So you want to leave this as is, wrap it, and then use something else, like the wrapper, the weapon pivot I have here, or the wrapper, you can call it whatever you want, to make sure that we can still move this around, like moving it out there, and then the weapon will still animate correctly wherever we move it. And that's why you want to do that. So we'll move it back to where it was. That's fine. That's the idle animation done. Another animation that we could do is the fast attack animation. So we'll go with fast attack inside the animations weapon folder. And all I need here is record. I'll move it out a little bit more. I'm going to rotate it down like that, up like this, maybe a little bit further out. Right? I'm going to go on frame 60 and poke those two holes, so the entire animation now is being mapped exactly the same. But I do go on the very last frame, and I'm still in record, so any changes I make will be recorded here. So I want to go to the very edge. I'm going to go to the global axis. The position X is going to be negated. So I'm going to go with positive X. And the rotation around the Y, I'm going to also negate. So I'm literally just twisting it around. I'm going to go with a little bit more local rotation here. Right? And I'm probably going to give it a little... I'm not even sure if the player is in 0, 0. Oh, he is. All right. So technically this should be giving me a pretty decent look. But you can see that it's already animated by setting those recording points. The only issue I have now is it's really close to my player. It's kind of like punching me in the gut, which is not what I want. And it's further out here, but then it's quite close here. So maybe we can fix that. So it goes from 1.2 to there. I'm going to move it further out and see what that's like. It wasn't recording, so it didn't do anything. So record, move it out. You can see it does a little bit more. And somewhere in the middle, where the blade is pointing straight, I want to move it out a bit and maybe down a bit. Maybe rotate it ever so slightly. So you can see that it goes. And if I play, that's the rotation. Now, if I want it done a little faster, I can just Control A to select all the keyframes and drag it in to make it like so. And that's faster now. And that's fine for my animation. So I'm going to save that. And next, I'm going to be going into an animator system. Now, the animator is going to be something you already have. If you look at your weapon, you're going to have an animator component here that's been attached. And there's going to be a weapon animator that we're referencing. There's the idle animation that we made, the fast attack animation that we made. And the weapon animator itself is going to just have the idle and the fast attack animation that's still kind of looking around, kind of sad, like, what am I doing here? I'm pointless. So to make the fast attack, we want to transition with the triggers that we've set in the script. So we set a trigger called fast attack and another one called strong attack. We're going to, in the parameters section, in the animator, we're going to go create a trigger, call it fast attack, create a trigger, call it strong attack, and we're going to make a transition. And this transition, if we click on the arrow, will be fast attack. Now, one way I can make a strong attack is by duplicating using Control D. I'll call this strong attack. Make a transition. Boop. There we go. And strong attack now will go to another arrow using strong attack parameter. So we can go from fast attack or strong attack. And of course, these have to exit. And as they exit, they will re-enter back into the idle flow. So we can do that. And that's all we need to do this is to make this a little slower. So the speed will be reduced, let's say 0.7. And this will be, just slower. That's it. So if we play, hopefully this works, but if not, we'll see what went wrong. So it says weapon animator has not been assigned to weapon to controller. That's probably because I didn't really drag an animator here. The weapon has the animator, so we can just drag that in and play again and see what happens. And in the animator, we'll see the idle animation. We click and it goes to fast attack. We right click and nothing happened. Oh, actually, it goes to strong attack. I thought it would fail, but no, it didn't. It went to strong attack. The other thing we want, and it's probably because, yeah, it's delayed. When I'm right clicking, it doesn't always fire. It's because it's trying to finish the idle animation first. And that's because these two arrows have an exit time on them. And I don't want that. I want to immediately fast attack or strong attack before it exits. Whereas this does have an exit time, and it does make sense to have an exit time there. So at 0.6 seconds of this animation, it can exit and go to something else, but it's not really that important in this case, so it will stay. One way we can do combos is to duplicate the fast attack, for example, and duplicate it again. Let's make this 1 and 2. Let's make the speed a little faster here, like 1.4. And let's make the speed a little faster, 1.2, and make it negative. So it reverses the animation instead, while still doing it faster. We'll make a transition and a transition, and we'll make this transition with no exit time and no exit time, but I will require the fast attack to once again be available. Because we're using triggers here, not a Boolean, even though it is technically a Boolean, a trigger will get consumed. So once we turn it on, and it's on, right, it gets consumed. If you want someone to be able to tap once and keep attacking repeatedly, then you want to use a Boolean instead of a trigger. But because we're using a trigger, it will always get consumed, so it will attack and consume it at this point. And then if the player clicks again while the attack is happening, it will consume it. And this exit needs an exit time. And I'm going to make an exit time of about 1.1, just so it's a little bit longer than the animation. So even if the player clicks after the animation has ended, he's still stuck in the state, and he can still do another fast attack just briefly afterwards, right? So this will also make a transition to exit, and we do want to have an exit time here of 1.1 or maybe 1.2, because this will be even faster, so he'll have even less time. And same here, we'll make an exit animation, and in this time this won't have an exit time because this is the final point, and if we finished it, we just exit. No big deal. Once again, we can duplicate this. We can make strong attack 1. We can make a transition, make it use strong attack. Not sure if I triggered this in. I didn't trigger that in, so it's fast attack once more, fast attack there, strong attack here, and make a transition to here. No need to have an exit time in this case, but I do want an exit time on this with an exit time of, let's say, 1. Actually, just leave it 0.8, because this is a slower animation. So if you're taking your time, dude, and I'll give it the exit time to be a little slower. So let's try to run these and see what happens. So you can see that we've kind of gotten stuck ourselves in this particular position. Something's a little wonky with our exits and such. So let's see if turning on exit time might fix that. Okay, so it seems to be giving us some movement. Another thing that we need to fix is the fact that at the end it was looping still, and that's because the idle animation is looping, and that's fine, but the fast attack is also looping, and we don't want that. So if we click on the fast attack and we disable loop time, we can get rid of that looping for all of them, because they're all relying on the same animation. They're just changing its speed and its reversion. So that kind of simplifies things a bit, and maybe we don't want to crush this so much. We might want to move this a little further out and give ourselves a bit of time. That's how I usually tend to do them. I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure what these do, so I should probably be reading a tutorial about those myself. I don't think we need an exit time here either, but we'll see. Okay, so it needs at least one condition, so it has to have an exit time in this case, and maybe these don't. Or maybe no, these do, and the other ones don't. Those, yeah, exactly, they don't need an exit time because they have that. That does have an exit time, which it shouldn't. Oh no, it should, because that's to exit, and this shouldn't have an exit time, but it does, so we'll remove it. And this should also have an exit time because it has nothing else. So that seems to make more sense. Let's try to play it again. Those were the 3 combos. That's pretty nice. The fact that it's firing so slowly though, and the fact that it's interrupting is a little annoying, so maybe we want to have the exit time to still make sense here. So I want an exit time on this, and I want it to be 1. I want it to finish, and I want the exit time to be, well, 0.6 is fine. That's okay. So we have to decide a little bit earlier. Maybe we can just do that. That's fine. Yeah, it's a strong attack. So it's fine to have a bigger exit time and just kind of hold us a little stuck in there. Yeah, but now we're transitioning immediately, which we don't want. There we go. We need the exit time, which is still staying on. So that's in a much better shape. We're saving the scene. And that's essentially hooked up the movement, the jumping, and the animations in a very simplistic way. So we have 3 attacks that are fast, 2 that are slow, and I think I should have inverted the slow one as well. I forgot about that. So it can come the other way. There you go. It goes left to right and then right to left. Same with this. It goes left to right, right to left, and left to right again. And it gets progressively faster. And it goes back to idling. You can still jump. And it's jumping us a little more when we're low. It's really not jumping us much at all though. So let's improve that a bit. Gravity controls. Jump force will be 10 or 15. Maybe we'll shoot off into the sky. Oh, yep, we almost do. If we hold it, it's pretty aggressive. Yeah. If we tap it, tap it, tap it, hold it. You can see it gives us a lot more vertical height, so that's probably a bit excessive. Something like 10 might have made more sense. Tapping, tapping, holding, holding, tapping. Okay, now if you want to have the hold be even more effective, one thing you can do would be to like make the gravity reducer by, let's say, 10. So we can basically float while we're holding the space bar up until it terminates its hold action. But it will really give us a lot of room to lift. So we've reduced that. I'm gonna go with a tap, tap, hold. You can see just how much more height we get from doing that. So that's an easy way to kind of wire things in. It won't change the fact that you can still cheat. And you can see that I'm clipping all over the place. This is because the camera is a little bit overly aggressive with clipping, so let's fix that too. We can set the camera clipping plane a little bit closer. So let's make it 0.1, for example. And that's more than enough. We don't really have anything that large. And this should be a bit better now. You can see it's not clipping as much. Of course, our weapon is clipping, but it's not a big deal. So that's how it goes. And yeah, any questions you're welcome to ask in the comments or just on the Discord forum itself.